The next presentation under our theme of the vet as the guardian of animal welfare is Where Next for Food Assurance Schemes, more outcome-based with an increased welfare focus. And this presentation will be given by David Main of the University of Bristol. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you for inviting me to talk about this interesting topic. I hope you find it interesting. I was given these two questions and I'm sort of going to take them separately. The first one I'm going to consider with reference to what Falk has said on this, and the next one I'm going to give you some updates of what's happening in the UK in various industries at the moment. So, yes, so the reference for the first part, I'm going to refer to these two reports. I notice that Christopher Wathers is here in the audience today. I'm going to use these to discuss where we are with farm assurance schemes and where we want to be. Well, the first one is the Past, Present and Future report in 2009, and the second one was the Education, Communication and Knowledge Application. A bit of a mouthful, I'm afraid, that one. That was done in 2011. The fundamentals within Falk reports at the moment, of course, we've got our mantra of the 5 freedoms, and that was retained within the 2009 report. But also within the 2009 report, as many will be aware, I'm sure, is the introduction of the concept of a good life and the suggestion of having tiers, a life not worth living, a life worth living, and a good life, and represented in this diagram here. So my question is, well, if that is tiers of welfare, surely that should be our ideal food label that we could all rally around and could be the ultimate thing that we can use. And if we were in utopia, then yes, I agree. That's what would be a good idea, because we could all rally around and define what a good life was, and we could have a nice, clear communication strategy around it. Unfortunately, we don't live in utopia. And neither is it a totalitarian state where we could force this change on things. No, that isn't going to happen. That's not where we are. Where we are is probably better described, well, this rather complicated slide here from the 2011 report. And this really summarises where we are with animal welfare claims for farm animals. First of all, we can have a retailer wanting to make assurance claims supported by an assurance scheme with appropriate UCAS accreditation to EN 45011. We then may have a retailer wanting to make a production system claim, and these may be controlled by legislation. So in eggs, of course, we've got the husbandry system described in terms of cages, free range, barn and organic, and they are enshrined in legislation, and you have to label eggs according to those production system descriptors. And a production system descriptor is a simple description that will convey the meaning of the system, so the consumers can imagine, as it were, what it is. As well as legislated controls, we have some codes of practice. So in the pig sector in the UK, we have agreed terms, outdoor reared, free range, etc., outdoor bred, that people within the UK industry at least sign up to using, so at least they're known and defined. Some systems, such as dairy, we really haven't got equivalent system descriptors available. Then, of course, a retailer may want to make an organic claim, and of course that is controlled by EU regulation. A retailer may also want to make an animal welfare claim, and that really is controlled by generic Consumer Protection Trading Standards, Advertising Standards Authority, those sorts of existing controls. But also, very importantly, a retailer may have certain animal welfare policies within their corporate social responsibility policy. So the overarching goal, they say, we do this for animal welfare. Again, there's not many controls on that point. So this is where we are. We're at a complicated mix of claims, controls over animal welfare status of products. And you could get head up about this, or you could say, what a terrible thing, isn't this awful? But I take the view, actually, this does reflect a lot of innovation and positive activity and actually competition between standards, which I think is a very good thing and should be welcomed. So I think it's not something to get too worried up about. So as an example of an animal welfare claim, this is just a poster board for Red Tractor scheme, talks about high welfare pork. Some people might get het up about the claim for high welfare in this example. I don't at all, because I think the point is this at least symbolises the pig industry is really keen on animal welfare, wants to make statements about animal welfare, and of course then can be scrutinised against that. So I see this as a positive. And also, just to show you that I'm up to date on these things, this was a photo I took on the tube this morning. I don't know whether anybody else saw this on the tube this morning. A large poster marketing organic. And it's very small words, I'm afraid there are... Yeah, for one reason for this is the high animal welfare standards. So they are using the same claim as the red tractor claim before. Again, I think this just symbolises that society broadly has an interest in animal welfare, which I think is overall a positive thing. But some people have suggested that this confusion is a bad thing. So, for example, within the Falk report, many consumers are motivated about animal welfare, but are confused with information that is provided and are thereby frustrated in their choice. So if you take the humble egg, you have a method of production code, as described, caged, barn, free-range, organic, so that's based on legislation. We have different certification schemes. I mean, you can have eggs which have labelled all of these three labels on there. The line quality scheme, which includes a salmonella vaccination requirement, Freedom Food Soil Association. But crucially, we also have retailers having policies about their animal welfare. And also we have, of course, individual companies making individual claims about their products. So it's interesting to see, well, does that cause confusion? Is that a problem? Well, for most of these things, an interested consumer can go and find out about them. That's one thing. Most of these things are transparent. And actually, if ever there was a solution, I think it's about the retailer packaging of things, because most consumers don't want to go to their supermarket shelf and sit themselves in a moral dilemma. Shall I have this product or shall I have that product today? Corey, oh my God, what do I do? What product shall I choose today? Actually, no, most people want to go shopping, don't want to be bothered with that choice, and they want to make the right choice. And that's why retailers are having their standards, certain levels, and what the social scientists call that's choice editing. So they're only presenting certain things to their consumers. So most of the major retailers do this to some extent, and McDonald's are doing that now. I mean, there have been free-range eggs for a long time in McDonald's, and recently they've announced Freedom Food pork in their pork products. Next one seems to me they could go Freedom Food on their chicken meat, for example. These are all good things that really are not a major player, not forced down consumers' throats, but they are having a very real influence on the products that are used in the food chain. So if there ever was, I believe, a solution to this consumer thing, it's about the pressure on retailers to make sure that they are purchasing the right products, having the right animal welfare standards. Falk has made comment on the governance of consumer information. Rather a complicated sentence this, but I think it's worth reading. Independent governance is needed to align higher welfare claims to a common and identifiable set of defined welfare objectives and outcomes against which welfare claims can be compared directly by interested consumers. The governance framework should develop codes of practice to provide guidance on appropriate marketing claims about farm animal welfare. So the mantra here is about, well, let's just try to explain and standardise claims across the board so people can understand what they're buying if they're interested, which seems like a reasonable approach. The game in town at the moment, I suppose, is what's happening in Europe. As part of the EU strategy for the protection of welfare of animals, 2012-2015, they talk about a new EU framework to increase transparency and adequacy of information to consumers on animal welfare for their purchase choice, which I think is trying to get through that principle of providing information. So where is that going? Well, we're not quite sure at the moment. Maybe others in the room have a clearer idea, but it's not completely clear. But there is a campaign at the moment organised by these organisations, Compassion World Farming, RSPCA, Soil Association, and WSPA, where they are promoting extension of the method of production system labels. So we have got that already for eggs, and the proposal is to extend that to other species. And this is supported because we are proposing labelling by method of production because it gives consumers information on the potential for high welfare that the system offers when the system is well managed. But then, very importantly, this group recognise that the quality of management and stock people play a key role in ensuring the quality of all production systems. We therefore propose that the labelling system should include outcome measured safeguards, which leads on to the second part of the talk, talking about how outcomes is a very important part of the mix. Really providing a production system descriptor isn't really sufficient on its own because they can be poorly managed. So where next with these myriad of animal welfare claims, which, as I said, can lie on top of each other? You can have all of these claims related to one product. First of all, I think assurance schemes will be including more outcomes, and I'm going to talk about that. I think higher welfare schemes might collaborate and get together and agree international voluntary standards. I think that's feasible to allow free trade in higher welfare products. I think that's a reasonable approach. On production systems, Europe may enable standardisation of more production system descriptors, in other words, more than eggs, and crucially to include a descriptor for the intensive, whatever that descriptor might be. That is where it's controversial. On organic, I think organic schemes will include more outcomes, we know that. And as regard to welfare claims and CSR policies, I don't see any more activity on that front. So, I've alluded to the importance of outcomes, so I'm going to now go into the second part, and we're talking about what is happening with welfare outcomes in the UK at the moment. Just to remind folks, welfare is dependent about what things you provide animals, so stockman is most important there, the environment, of course, the animal itself, its breed, etc. And the outcomes are things that you can observe, see, record, related to behaviour, physical condition, and records, etc. There has been a lot of effort in welfare outcomes recently, and there is now a European standard defining, trying to standardise welfare outcome measures in pigs, cattle and poultry, which is very useful when you're having, obviously, initiatives that go across other countries. So that work has been done and is available, so that's a good thing. But why have we got these outcomes? Well, going back to that point about production systems, a production system itself, and sometimes not even the assurance scheme, influence, but they do not necessarily guarantee outcomes. Several studies have shown that in laying hens, for example, in different housing systems, you get overlap in outcomes, and they're not enough on themselves. You need to have system descriptors and outcomes to be able to give good assurance in animal welfare. And our earlier work in Freedom Food also highlighted you need to have outcome safeguards as well. So we've been involved in a project called the Assure Well project, which is a collaboration between ourselves, Soil Association, RSPCA, and also on some species working very closely with the Red Tractor scheme. And as part of this project, we've been trying to encourage the use of outcome assessments within farm assurance schemes to improve animal welfare. And our first goal was to do that within Freedom Food and Soil Association, and then our second goal was to promote the uptake within other schemes. And we've working through the species. We've done laying hens, which I'll describe. We're currently working on dairy, pigs as well, and hopefully we'll get to the other species in due course. And really, what is the nub of what is being introduced? Well, essentially, new assessment procedures are being introduced. So on the laying hen side, which covers more than 95% of non-caged laying hen units, all farms are assessed as part of their routine monitoring anyway. Before 2011, there was an informal assessment by assessors. So you might see reports in the paperwork, birds seen were in good body condition with limited feather loss. After 2011, this became formalised, where 50 birds are scored with selected outcome measures based where possible on the welfare quality measures. And that's the nub of the assessment procedure. And as I've mentioned, this is now being implemented in other schemes. So for the pig sector, from this year, the producer must require their vet to undertake what they call real welfare assessments in accordance with a specific protocol. And they have done some pilot work and have got some figures of what they're expecting to see on a range of units. So the type of assessments are lame pigs in need of hospital pens, tail lesions, severe tail lesions, body marks, severe body lesions, and oral behaviour. Those are all being measured as part of the quarterly veterinary visit, and I know there's people here that are actually involved in that work. And also, similarly in the dairy scheme, there is now going to be inclusion of outcome measures. So from this October, the assessor, in this case, will be measuring lameness, body condition, hair loss, lesions and swellings, and cleanliness in 20 cows, a response to animals to the stockman, and a measure of some data, so mortality, culling, and mastitis. This is a big change. It's come about within the pig and dairy sector. These things have already been included within the Freedom Food and Soil Association schemes, and now they're being rolled out in the Red Tractor schemes as well, which I think is a hugely positive exercise. I want to mention at this point a bit of a technical point, but I think it is quite important and it does come up in many discussions, and that's the issue of sampling, how many animals you look at. Because at the end of the day, if you're asking people to assess whether it's the private vet or the assessor, it takes time, and the time costs money. And so how many animals you look at depends on what you're trying to achieve. All of these systems that I've described, an important goal is to find out what is happening at a scheme level, or in some cases at an industry level, to actually find whether the standards are right, to find out what is normal, and all of the sampling strategies I've described so far do that, and they give you good data. But at a farm level, it depends what you're trying to achieve. The numbers that we've been talking about do promote its use, these outcome measurements, as a management tool. Very important for increasing awareness, interest in these difficult animal welfare issues, and allow some comparison benchmarking between others. But then it starts to get a bit more awkward about whether you're using this information to support an assessment judgment of resource or against other standards. It gets a bit harder further still if you want to use it to identify farms at risk, and it's certainly not really a sampling strategy that you could use it as an outcome standard. So in other words, you must never have more than X percentage of lame cows, for example. The sampling strategies that have been used, that are being used, are not going to give you that type of information. But they do give you scheme-level data, and they do promote its use as a management tool, which I think is very important. Just a word about why we've had the introduction in the Red Tractor schemes, and I think the nub of this really is about the industry strategies, which are hugely positive and have come about because the industry wants to tackle these issues in a very positive way, both in the pig industry and in the dairy industry. I mean, no direct involvement of government. Lots of government vets here and everything, and of course government has its role, but on these issues, this has happened because the industry wants to sort it, and I think that's a hugely positive thing to report. So if you're interested, there's further information on the website describing these protocols, and all the technical detail is on there. But what I want to actually stress at this point is it's not actually, the assessment isn't the end goal. The end goal, as far as those of us working with welfare outcomes, really is about welfare improvement, not about just assessing it. So how can it promote welfare improvement? Well, the general approach is that during a visit, actually doing the assessment and having a positive discussion with the farmer is very important. You can observe the animals and discuss the results with the farmer. It's a great opportunity to promote interest and awareness in these issues. After the visit, you can encourage husbandry change further, making sure that they have appropriate generic technical advice, that they're also encouraged to seek specific advice and work with others. For a few farmers that are struggling, there may be a need to insist on change. And this is a farm assurance schemes after all. They are about providing assurance to the consumer. And there are already existing standards that require either individual treatment or flat management, whatever it might be, that cover these issues. So the tools are there, and this approach can help support those decisions. They're not the only measure, of course, but they can be useful to help promote interest and awareness for those farmers which are struggling. An important issue that we've tried to do is have no major change in the time allowed or the frequency of the visit. We've tried to incorporate this into the existing processes. On the laying hen side, we've been doing this for a year or more, and we've been able to benchmark the data. So after each assessment now, the laying hen producer will get a piece of paper with their results on it, but it's also benchmarked so they can see how they compare to other farms. And for laying hens, this is a measure of feather loss. I don't know whether I can just, there we go. I'll get the right end, there we go. The amount of feather loss increases as the age of the flock increases, and this cross here is this guy's particular result, 40, 50 weeks, etc. And the colours here indicate where they are compared to other farms. So if they were in the red zone, they would be in the worst 25%, green, best 25%, and this is the median line here. So at a glance, the producer can see how they are compared to others. So we found that a useful tactic to promote discussion and engagement in their results. And of course, we have been able to organise and support provision of technical advice on issues. So obviously in laying hens, the critical issue at the moment is about feather loss because of the imminent beak trimming ban in 2016. So there's an increased industry effort to try to tackle the issue of feather loss in laying hens. So these are all designed tactics to promote interest, help provide solutions, get farmers managing these issues. Because schemes can promote change, of course they assess compliance with a standard, but they can also actively promote best practice. Although assessors must not, if they're accredited, most schemes are, give specific prescriptive advice or provide instruction on possible solutions, they can encourage interest awareness, provide technical guides, advocate the value of advice, explain the benefits of solving the problem. And we've been spending a lot of time, especially with the Freedom Food and Soil Association scheme, to promote this spreading best practice philosophy, which is in accordance with accreditation, etc. And of course, vets have a crucial role in providing technical advice and maintaining interest, which I'll just comment on a bit more in a minute. Because I think the communication challenge is absolutely fundamental to animal welfare issues. It really is about motivating farmers even when they do not perceive a problem. It's quite easy to provide a farmer with a husbandry solution when they're bothered about it. But when they aren't bothered about it in the first place, that's when your welfare challenge is. So over time, when you have repeat visits from your vet or your assessor, etc., this process provides an opportunity to increase interest, enthusiasm in a positive direction. That has to be supported at an industry level where you need consistent positive message to reinforce this approach, and you need to be aware of possibly undermining industry efforts. And at a farm level, of course, vets can help motivate farmers to try to make changes, and assessors can also encourage the farmer to seek advice and take an interest. So these communication challenges are really fundamental to the whole process. I would flag to you a couple of examples of industry communication. So on the dairy side at the moment, there's been a lot of activity trying to promote the right response from farmers. First of all, they did a consultation exercise, which was got an amazing response. 800 people responded to the consultation exercise, and the Red Tractor scheme adjusted its protocols based on that consultation. And now they're in collaboration with Dairy Co, are producing materials to try to explain why this activity is happening and the benefits to them. Similarly, the same has happened in the pig industry. This is an article from Pig World, and it has important quotes here, one from Stuart Houston at Heart. We are all stockmen first, the businessmen second. This programme will give us the tools to demonstrate our professionalism as stockmen and stockwomen. At the same time, it will be good for business. So trying to reinforce the positive messages about welfare outcomes and how it's important for the industry, etc. So these are good examples of industry communication trying to explain why the industry is doing this and the benefits to individual farms. This is another example of an industry-level communication. John McKinnon, who's a friend I know, a pig vet working in Suffolk, he wrote in Pig World in April 2013 under the title, Real Welfare, Good or Bad Science? ? Oops, there's a challenge already. First line, nowadays we're faced with the all-pervading and ever-increasing miasma of quality assurance in livestock production, particularly in the field of animal welfare. It's swelling the coffers of university departments, oh dear, of charities and of limited companies that deliver quality assurance, whatever that might mean. I question the value of the latest proposals known as real welfare, soon to be imposed on the nation's pig producers as a new addition to quality assurance. He then went on to discuss some of the detail of sampling aspects, which are all fair points and worth discussing. And then he concludes, real welfare seems to me a bit like the emperor's new clothes, but rest assured, if this is what the industry really, really wants, then I will carry out the assessments to the best of my ability. Well, I mean, John, I respect John a lot, and the points he's making in the article were valid points and worth the discussion. But unfortunately, these sorts of articles, the sceptical approach to these articles, can be picked up by others in the industry, and may have a depressing effect on the introduction of this process. And at the end of the day, the industry does really, really want it. It is actually very keen on doing it because the pig industry wants a unique welfare aspect that it can continue selling to its consumers. So I just highlight as an example of how our role as vets at an industry level can make a difference. But at the farm level, of course, vets working at a farm level, the communication challenge there is fundamental. I quite like this quote from an article Owen Atkinson wrote in Practice, and he talks about a case example of Jenny, a practitioner with an interest in mastitis. She had recently undertaken a comprehensive mastitis review for Mr. Jameson. When the large envelope landed on Mr. Jameson's breakfast table a month later, he had almost forgotten about Jenny's parlour visit. Nevertheless, Mr. Jameson duly flicked through the opus and noted that Jenny certainly seemed to know her stuff, and that she had done a marvellous job of drawing some coloured graphs on the computer. In due course, he carefully replaced the report back into the envelope and put it diligently in his herd health folder. Oh dear. So that, I think, gives us the challenge of how we can miss the communication opportunity. So that's my chance to be self-reflective here. I just showed you some lovely, pretty graphs that I think are very, very clever. But they may miss the point. And I think it always reminds us that we need to be careful of what we do and how we do it and why you're doing it. To me, the graphs are fine because they're trying to promote a positive discussion about welfare. That is their point. It's not about showing how clever you are, which is sometimes what we do. And actually, the other point being self-reflective, it is something that you can come out of vet school with that type of approach. And cleverness is sort of valued sometimes within vet school because you produce these lovely long lists of recommendations, all this, lots of detail behind it. You're very clever, that's great. But actually, will it be useful and valuable for your client? Not necessarily. How you deliver your messages is as fundamental as the message itself. And I think we should always be mindful of that issue. So how you speak is crucial. So, for example, just little things. if you as a vet say to a farmer, you should use more bedding, that's quite confrontational, it's judgmental, it's not going to get the response that you need. But if you rephrase it in terms of, could we do something to improve cow comfort, and we all agree that cow comfort's important, you're much more likely to get a positive reaction. So how you interact with your clients, of course, is a fundamental driver and really will influence how you can bring about change. So to summarise welfare outcomes, I think there really is a genuine industry effort to maximise the impact of farm insurance schemes on animal welfare. I really do believe that. And there are definitely opportunities to promote behaviour change. That is the name of the game. It's about improving animal welfare, which requires change in husbandry. It requires some change in behaviour. The primary strategy, of course, is to focus on these outcome measures as a management tool to increase interest, enthusiasm, etc. A supporting strategy for those where it doesn't respond is about a certification tool, and we need to recognise that it has a potential place, but it's not your mainstay driver. There are definitely opportunities for the veterinary profession here. There's definitely demand for services. Where there's going to be self-assessment, you've got to support that. Where there's a need for technical advice, of course, vets have a role there. And of course, it needs to link with the health planning requirements that are already embedded within assurance schemes. And crucially, I think we all need to share these communication strategies, because without them, we ain't going to make any difference at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. We have time for some questions. There's one down here at the front. Right at the very front.
Paul Roger from Ethics and Welfare Group, BVA. David, following on from the comments by John McKinnon, if we're going to move from this acceptable standard of a life worth living to a good life, how do we do that without having some kind of base minimum standards? Because although you can look at the outcome measurements, we still need something to compare those against. And do you think that the consumer actually needs to be helping to deliver the impetus to motivation to change to our farmers?
So several aspects there. First of all, to give a good life, I think it is important that you do have resource standards as well as outcome measurements. I don't think outcome measurements do deliver a good life. I think you need to have certain standard requirements. I think we have got a really good baseline. I think the Red Tractor scheme is a really good industry level that does provide a genuine assurance on welfare, because it is associated with the annual inspections, etc. So I think that's a genuine benefit. The issue of, but we also, of course, need the good life pull for those that want to go further. But the role of consumers in that pull, I think, is interesting and can be overplayed, because I said it's the most drive for change at a policy level really is down to the retailers and what they're anticipating their consumers want. And so you don't need to have active choosing of higher welfare products to do that. You just need to have retailers knowing their customer base better and going, well, our customers would expect this, so this is what we're going to deliver. And I think it is, because there's so many different ways you can describe animal welfare, it's a complicated message, and so we're not going to be able to educate, the masses and drive change that way. I think there will always be animal welfare pressure, there will always be media stories driving that fundamental concern, but at the end of the day, I think the drive for higher welfare is primarily going to come from retailers trying to anticipate what their customer wants. That's how I see it anyway.
I have another question here. There's a lady at the back there, and then Peter, and then Robin.
Thank you. Catherine McLaughlin from the National Farmers Union. I just wanted to thank you, David, for such a positive lecture and for acknowledging the work that my members are doing to actively try and kind of engage in the welfare debate. There is still, though, the issue of price. We are in a recessionary condition at the minute. We are picking up in a lot of the surveys that we see that actually consumers are now watching their price and their food budget really, really carefully. So I think that's just something that does need to be acknowledged when we have all of these talks about welfare outcomes and welfare standards. There's also as well the fact that in the UK we are actually competing in a global market, and we do see that there are other consumers and other countries putting produce into the UK marketplace that are not even attempting to compete on a level playing field when it comes to welfare, and yet the market and the price is the same. So that's also an issue that we need to address. But I'd also like to just put in one extra bullet to one of your last slides, where you were talking about the role of the vet. I think as vets, you have a really important role. You're trusted amongst the consumers, you're trusted in the media, and all I would like to say is, please, as vets, could you help back the UK farmers by actually coming out and saying some positive things about what we're doing? Don't continually keep talking about, you know, kind of the bad farmers, but help to endorse what we are doing.
That's great. I mean, I'll only comment on one point about the money side. Of course, most of those issues that respect to welfare outcomes are win-wins. So you improve welfare, you improve productivity. But that's a lazy answer to that generic point. And it is important that we try to maintain standards for imported product as well as others, and of course retailers have a key role there where government cannot, because they can't put those requirements on. There may be some mileage in the European activity in this area, because they are well, the Commission, we've had some meetings with them, and they are interested in what we are doing, and so there may be some drive to have welfare outcomes at a European level. But I, of course, recognise that's not global. So there are always these challenges in that respect. But I think it's very important, your point about being positive. We as vets, rightly or wrongly, we have a very influential role, and things are good. Things are very, very positive in this area, and I think we should celebrate it and sometimes take our sceptical hat off, save the scepticism for internal meetings. And we do need to have sceptical roles there, but let's be positive, yeah.
Peter?
Thank you, Tiffany. Peter Jones, BVA. Kat McLaughlin's question was almost a cue for me to come in with mine, I guess. Thank you for your excellent talk. Very often at BVA, we're talking about how to increase and gain greater influence for the vets in the retail end of the food chain. Our Veterinary Development Council has talked about that at some length. But it's a real struggle to try and persuade some of our profession that there's the opportunities that you're telling us are there. And when I see John McKinnon's comment, and he's also a very old friend as well, and he can be quite sceptical, that prevails amongst many of our members. So whilst you've described the opportunities, how do we convince our profession that this role is really there for them? And to answer sometimes the criticism of the food retailers that they don't think we're sufficiently well qualified and experienced to play that crucial role. I'd really like to hear what your thoughts might be.
I don't know. I struggle to see what more we could do. Maybe others have other ideas in the audience of how we can have that appropriate engagement with vets, because I know on the pig side and on the dairy side that the relevant associations, Pig Veterinary Society and BCVA, have been actively involved in those discussions, and so there's never, I sense never any lack of engagement being offered from the organisations, and I think we just forget what our status is out there, and we just need to advocate the message that we can make a positive positive difference at that policy level. But yeah, of course, and this is very easy for me. I'm just an academic sitting here and telling others what to do, and that's the worst type of approach. It's possible to do it. That's all I would say, and you sometimes can have different discussions in public to do as in private, and I think that's all I would argue for. But maybe I'm very interested in some other pig vets or whatever to put the other view. I know it's Davies at the front. Maybe you'd like to.
Robin, and then Judith.
Robin Hargreaves, BVA as well. I was interested in what you said about the driver having to come from the retailers, and we wouldn't need to worry too much about the public. But we had conversations with some of our pig colleagues, and they'll probably tell you better than I will. But one of the concerns about the new welfare assessments in pigs was that how could we guarantee that the cost was taken upwards and not downwards? If we leave it to the retailers, then the retailers can decide where they apply that cost. If we don't have the public being prepared to pay for that, then it's got to filter down. And we had the example of a pigman saying, well, look, if this costs me 10p a head, if you gave me 10p a head, my welfare outcomes would be better anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that goes back to Catherine's point about the cost effectiveness of what you're doing. And I think, of course, as vets, it's about selling the value of your time, and there's both ends, selling the value of your time to assess and then give your advice on that assessment, but also, of course, the industry itself needs to have a better, closer working relationship with its customer to make sure that the value is passed on. And so all I think we can do is to wave the flag about the positive welfare things that are being doing, so that the industry, the retailers, do value and pay for those welfare advantages. But of course, it's a messy old world when you get down to the pounds, shilling and pence, and who's going to pay for this extra half an hour worth of time, and that's what we're talking about. So in the pig side, it's interesting because it's been a requirement that the vet does this time, so it's obviously not. The scheme itself is not taking on that extra cost, whereas in the dairy sector, it's the assessor that's doing the extra time. So it's a different dynamic. But the pig sector said, we've got a very close working relationship with our pig vets because they come every 3 months, etc. They're the group of people that we value the most. Therefore, we think we want to use our pig vets. But of course, it does leave the pound, shilling and pence conversation still to be done, yeah. Yeah.
Judith first and then David.
Judith Charnley from the Sheep Vet Society. I've just come back from New Zealand where I saw lots and lots of sheep. And I went to one farm, a sheep farm, where they had 49,000 sheep. They have just secured a contract with a very well-known supermarket here in the UK to supply fat lambs. But the supermarket, in New Zealand, they dock tails very, very short. But the supermarket said in order to secure the contract, they had to leave the tails long, according to the UK legislation, which all sounds really very good and lovely. But what isn't good is that they actually will dock and castrate the lambs when they gather them, when the lambs are about 4 months of age, which is with rubber rings, when, of course, that's illegal in this country. It has to be done by a week of age. So do you have any comments about supermarkets selling, supposedly on paper, very welfare-friendly meat, when actually it isn't? And should we actually need to educate the supermarket buyers about what is actually welfare-friendly?
That's a nice example, isn't it, of the demonstration of the power of the retailer, because they're wanting to apply the same UK standard overseas, so that's a positive. Of course, when it gets to the technical detail of it, then there's sometimes pros and cons. And so, I mean, there are vets that are working with individual retailers on consultancy basis or whatever, and I think that role is very, very important. Unfortunately, that is one side of retailers. Of course, it is not as transparent as one would like to be, isn't it? You would like to have more openness about those sorts of conversations. But I think, it does highlight the importance of vets getting involved in the technical detail of policies. A good example, yeah.
I'll tell you who it is later.
Okay.
David?
David Chennels, animal welfare trustee and pig vet member and one of the trainers for the real welfare outcomes. David, thank you very much for a very balanced presentation. I think what's perhaps worth considering is how this does affect the industry, and supporting one or two comments that have been made. One is that I've always said that the best thing for animal welfare is profit. And I think this is a message that we are just starting to get across to the big supermarkets, that if they pay a little bit more, they can then say to the farmers, we are paying you more, deliver. So I think that's an important message to keep pushing and pushing hard. The interesting thing about doing the real welfare outcomes, which I did the pilot, and then I did the pre-pilot, then the pilot, then the training, was the first question that was always asked by the farmers is, how do I compare with the others? And I think that's the first positive move, because they actually not only care what they're doing, but how well they're doing it. And I think one of the other things that you have to consider is scale. And this is where things get lost. And I give lectures on pet pigs and small farm production to universities, and I show a picture of one of my clients. He's got a small farm shop. He's got some rare breeds, excuse me, and he sells his own pigs through his own shop. They're all outdoor bred, they're outdoor reared, they're outdoor finished. It looks wonderful. It is wonderful. He slaughters 5 pigs a week. Morrison's own 2 abattoirs. They slaughter just over 5,000 pigs a day. And in the end, you have to ask the question, is where do those 5,000 pigs come from? And as soon as you want that number of animals by big supermarkets, and they're only one of the big 5, it means large-scale production. And large-scale production inevitably will result in some form of compromise. You can't get away from it. And my final comment, John McKinnon may be a skeptic, but he did take his training very seriously indeed. Thank you.
Good.